put you through any more hardships. So, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Okay, so what we're going to do, we've completed the Aqidah section of the class. And what we want to start discussing is the next segment of the course, which is dealing with fiqh. Okay, we want to talk about what is fiqh and give you all some definitions, particularly for the two terms. Particularly, we want to talk about in introducing this topic. One is Sharee'ah, and the other is fiqh. Okay, Sharee'ah and fiqh. All right. So the book that I'm reading from, and I'm not going to, of course, as I said, I'm not going to read the whole book to you. We don't have time for that. But I just some things that I want to translate for you all out of this book that will give you some foundation about what the topic we're going to be discussing. The main book we're going to be using, that's okay. The main book we're going to be using is this book. This is volume 1 of it. It's 2 volumes. It's Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya fil Masail al-Fiqhiyya. Brilliant pearls, or like this, brilliant pearls regarding issues of fiqh. This book was written by a scholar, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ali al-Shawkani, also commonly known as Al-Imam al-Shawkani. Okay, Al-Imam al-Shawkani was from Yemen. Okay, and he lived maybe approximately 300 years ago, something like this. Okay, and this book, this is his explanation. This is actually, like I said, this is volume 1, and there's another volume, so there are 2 volumes. This is actually my textbook that I used when I was in the university in Yemen at Jami'atul Iman. This was the books that we were distributed for that class. Okay, but this is Al-Imam al-Shawkani's explanation of Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya fil Masail al-Fiqhiyya. So the text of the book is a lot smaller. The text of the book, is really even smaller than this. This is the text of the book, but even this has footnotes in it. This is a ta'liqat al-Zahiyya ala Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya. So these are footnotes, annotations to Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya, which Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya is the metin, which means the text of the book. And this is to summarize. Imam al-Shawkani just went through tahara, purification is this in Islam. Water is considered pure unless this and this and this happens to it. And you can use it for this and this and this. And then wudu is this. And then ghusl is that. And this is how you perform istinja. And then there's istijmar. And then he goes all the way. Then, okay, salat. What is salat? There's different types of prayer. There's this prayer, this, whatever the conditions for prayer. There are pillars of the prayer. So he goes through all of that, going from prayer, fasting, hajj, zakat, how to pay zakat, all of these things. Then going on to marriage and divorce laws and things, even laws and regulations about buying and selling, and all of that he deals with in this book. And he wrote it out. The text of the book doesn't have any proofs or evidences. There's no Allah said or the Prophet said. He's just writing out, this is the fiqh this is the fiqh according to, the fiqh meaning understanding, and we're going to get to that, but this is the understanding of Islamic jurisprudence according to what I know. And he wrote it out in a book. No ayats and hadiths or anything like that. So then what happened was, sometime later he came back and he explained that book with proofs and evidences of why he said this and why he said that, and what are the verses and what are the hadiths that support it, and what are the other opinions and why those opinions are wrong and his opinion is right based upon this, this, and this. And that he called Darari al-Mudiyya, Sharh Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya fil Masail al-Fiqhiyya. It's the explanation of the original text that he wrote. And that was this 2-volume book, okay? This is just a brief explanation with just some footnotes, but not by Al-Imam al-Shawkani. This is by a contemporary scholar, Sheikh Sa'id ad-Din Muhammad al-Kubbi, did this, okay? I have not been able to find it in English. A friend of mine, when I was working at Dar es Salaam Publications back between 1999 and the end of 2001, one of my colleagues who was working there with me as a translator, Abu Khalil Jad Sylvester, he wanted to start, he started a translation using this, a ta'liqat al-Zahiyya, this version of it, this shortened, abbreviated version of it. And he had started translating it, and he asked me, would I help him? And I said if I had time, whatever, but we were really busy over there working on other projects. We were translating Tafsir ibn Kathir, and we were translating Fatawa Islamiyya, and so I was really busy, and so I didn't really start, but he started working on it. But to date, I don't know that he completed it or that it has been published. I haven't seen it, That was like in 2001. Here we are, 2013. So I don't know if he ever completed that. But I remember when we were there in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, he started working on it, But I haven't seen a translation of it. If I can find one, if not, what I'm going to be doing is each chapter I'm going to translate for you wherever we go, and I'm going to be putting it in the slides that we use. So you will have, as Yasmin prints out the slides or whatever, you will have the text of it. I won't translate the explanation, but you will have the text of what Imam al-Shawkani said from the metin, the text of the book, Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya, at least. And then, of course, you have to, if there are notes you want to put, you have to add your own notes or what have you.
Is there a handout for this, or we take notes?
For today, no, there's no handout for today. But starting for next week, as we start going through the actual book, there will be we will use the PowerPoint and there will be handouts. You can. This is just going to be just some information. Information, a introduction to fiqh, basically. Okay. And so, but that's not what this is the book, but this is not what I'm going to be doing tonight. I just want you to introduce you all to the book. So these are the copies of what I'm going to be using as we go through explaining that book. I studied this book when I was in Yemen, as I said, at Jami'atul Iman, Al-Iman University in Sana'a. And our teacher for the book, our fiqh class for both semesters, first and second semester, was a Sheikh Muhammad bin Ismail al-Imrani, Sheikh al-Imrani. He's living now. Sheikh al-Imrani is considered a scholar, a great fiqh scholar, a faqih of Yemen. Some people have even called him the faqih of Yemen. And he's a mufti in the city of Sana'a, okay, which is the capital of Yemen. And Sheikh al-Imrani probably is, I would say he's probably maybe in his 90s now, late 80s, if not 90, He's very old. He has videos on YouTube where you can maybe, inshallah, when we, yes. I was in Yemen in 1999 and 2000. Wait, no, excuse me, 1998 through 99. Then I went back again in 2000. But when I was in the university, it was 98 and 99 when I was in Yemen.
What's his full name again?
Muhammad bin Ismail al-Imrani. Al-Imrani, okay. His teachers, matter of fact, I'll show you all the video next week when we start discussing the biography of Imam al-Shawkani and going into the actual book. But Sheikh al-Imrani, he had only 3 teachers between him and Imam al-Shawkani. So his chain of narration of his teachers was this guy to this guy to this guy, Shawkani. So there were only 3 teachers between him and Imam al-Shawkani. Okay, so he's the one who taught me this book, and he only had 3 teachers between him and the author. Okay, so I'm not anybody special or anything, but I just want you to know I learned this book from someone who took it from the original author of the book. So what else can I say? Okay, so that's that book. We're not going to start in Ad-Durr al-Bahiyya today, though. Today what we're going to do is an introduction to the science of fiqh. And I'm going to, like I said, try to be brief. The information I'm taking this from today is called, this book, the title of the book is Al-Madh-hab li dirasat al-Sharee'ah al-Islamiyya, an introduction to the Sharia studies of Islam, legal studies of Islamic law. Okay? And this book is by Dr. Abdul Karim Zaidan. And he also, this author, he is probably in his 90s too, very old sheikh. You can see videos of him on YouTube also. He's from Iraq, he's from Baghdad. But he teaches at Jami'atul Iman University in Sana'a, where I was studying. And I had him for this class and also in Usul al-Dawah, he was the teacher. So he's the author of the book, and also he was the instructor for the class. And this book is taught also in Saudi Arabia at Muhammad ibn Saud University, and at Qur'an University they use Abdul Karim Zaidan's books. This book, both his book Usul al-Dawah and this book Al-Madh-hab li dirasat al-Sharee'ah al-Islamiyya are taught in Saudi Arabia. And he's gotten many fiqh awards and awards for Usul al-Fiqh and fiqh from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Particularly Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, who was the former Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia, used to praise Abdul Karim Zaidan very much, particularly in the science of fiqh and Usul al-Fiqh. He was very did a lot of research in those areas and writing in those areas. Okay, and he's an old Iraqi sheikh, living in Sana'a in Yemen. Okay, so that's just some background. So going into our subject, the first thing, like as I said, we want to define 2 words today, is Sharia. Okay, the first thing is a Sharia, and he says a Sharia fil lugha al-madhhab wa tariqa al-mustaqima. He said, so Sharia, though this word Sharia, in the language of the Arabs, in Arabic language, it means a madhhab. It means a madhhab, meaning comes from the word dhahaba. Dhahaba means he went, to go. Dhahaba yadhabu dhihaban. Okay, it means to go, to travel, to traverse upon. Madhhab is the way that you go, the path that you traverse upon, that you travel upon. Sharia, he said, in the language of the Arab, it means madhhab. It means a path that you take. He says, what tariqat al-mustaqima, and it means a straight path. Okay. So there's also, it comes from another word, shara'a, which means al-ma' ay mawrid al-ma' alladhi yuqsadu lish-sharab. So he says it's a place, it comes from the word shara'a, which means shara'a, which means a water hole, a place where the people come or the animals come, the creatures come, all to get their drinks to survive. Okay. So the origin of this word comes from another word that means a watering hole, a place where people go to, or the animals come to. If you've seen National Geographic or something like this, and the water hole where the buffalo come and the zebras are all there, but then when the lion comes, everybody runs away and the lion gets its water. The watering hole, okay, that water hole is the survival. It's essential to the survival of the creatures in that area. Okay, without it, the creatures would all die. Okay, so this word comes from that. Okay. So he says, it also means nahj, okay? It means, nahj is another word which means path, okay? Which means a clear path, like this. And so a person would say, shara'a lahum yashra'u shar'an, ay sanna, which means, we use this word, he's just using verbal terminology for the word. It means to make a path for someone, to set out a way for someone, a path for someone, to establish a way for someone, like this. So it can be used in that sense. But he says, وَفِي الْإِسْتِلَاحِ الشَّرْعِي, and the legal terminology, technically, when we use the word Sharia in Islam, what do we mean by it? He says, مَا شَرَعَ اللَّهُ لِعِبَادِهِ مِنَ الدِّينِ أي من الأحكام المختلفة. So he says, it is whatever Allah has legislated for his creatures from the religion, meaning the law, the various different laws, okay? So when you hear this word Sharia, it means the law, the comprehensive laws of Islam, okay? The legal laws of Islam that Allah has set out, meaning in the either in the Qur'an, or that Allah revealed to his prophet in the authentic Sunnah, because the Sunnah is also legislation, okay? The Qur'an is legislation, but the Sunnah is also legislation, okay? So we don't believe as Muslims that Allah only gave Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the Qur'an. He gave Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Ala wa inni utitu al-Qur'an wa mithluhu ma'ahu." The Prophet said, "Verily, I was given the Qur'an, and it's like something similar to it along with it." And the scholar said, this is a Sunnah. They're talking about the Sunnah, okay? So both of them are two forms of revelation that Allah gave Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Qur'an, that form of revelation, is the wording of Allah. It's kalam Allah. It's the speech of Allah. It's exactly what Allah said in those words, okay? The Sunnah is the legislation that Allah gave Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in meaning, and the Prophet worded it himself, okay? That's why we don't recite the Sunnah. So the Sunnah is considered the wahi that is غير مقروءة. It's not recited. We don't recite hadith in salat when we're praying. You understand? But it is revelation from Allah, but it's not recited because it's not exactly the wording of Allah, but the meaning of it is from Allah. Allah gave this as the meaning to the Prophet Muhammad that this is what should be done, or this is what should be avoided, etc. And the Prophet conveyed it to his companions and to the rest of the ummah, but it was in his words, not the words of Allah. But the meaning was from Allah. When we talk about the Qur'an, that's the wahi that is maqru'ah, matlu'ah. It's recited, meaning this is the word of Allah. The meaning is from Allah, and the wording of it is exactly the words of Allah, and therefore we recite it when we pray in our prayers. Okay, so that's the difference. But they're both forms of legislation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So moving on, so that is what Sharia is, and Sharia is more broad. For example, Sharia would be the fact that Muslims have to wash before we pray, or that Muslims are supposed to pray. Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ, establish the prayer, okay? Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ لِلذِّكْرِ. And he says, Allah says, وَإِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا, okay? Allah says, verily, the prayer has been enjoined, established upon the believers at stated fixed times. And Allah said, establish the prayer to establish my remembrance, to remember me, okay? So Allah tells us to pray. But does Allah say how many rakahs are there for dhuhr? Does Allah say that there are sunnah prayers that you pray before fajr? Does Allah say how many times you bow in each rakah or how many times you prostrate in each rakah? No, okay? But the legislation from the Sharia is that we're supposed to pray and that we pray at certain times, okay? Now, how we do that and what we do in the prayer and where you place your hands and these type of things and what you say, that is something that is discussed more in detail in fiqh, okay? The science of fiqh, okay? Which we'll get to the discussion of that here shortly. Okay, so based upon what we've said, the Sheikh Abdul Karim Zaidan, he says, يمكن تقسيم أحكام الشريعة إلى ثلاثة مجموعات. So we can divide the laws of the Sharia into three categories, okay? There are three categories. الأولى, the first, الأحكام المتعلقة بالعقيدة كالإيمان بالله واليوم الآخر وهذه الأحكام الاعتقادية, okay? So he says, so the first type of laws that the Sharia has prescribed for us are laws that are related to beliefs, which we've discussed. That was the first part of our class. The Aqeedah, he calls it, okay? And he says, for example, like believing in Allah and believing in the last day and the laws pertaining to the different creed, things that related to our creed of belief, what the Muslim believes. That is also from the Sharia. Those are laws of, he says, al-ahkam al-muta'alliqa bil-aqeedah, laws related to belief, okay? Because Allah tells us what we're supposed to believe and what we shouldn't believe, okay? That's also law, okay? That's part of the Sharia. The second category of laws of the Sharia, he says, are الأحكام المتعلقة بالأخلاق كوجوب الصدق والأمانة والوفاء بالعهد وحرمة الكذب والخيانة ونقض العهد Okay? So he says, وَهَذِهِ هِيَ الْأَحْكَامِ الْأَخْلَاقِيَّةِ. Okay? So he says, the second category of laws that the Sharia deals with are related to character, morals. Okay? Laws pertaining to morals. Okay? For example, the obligation to be truthful and honest. The obligation to be trustworthy, to fulfill one's trust. The obligation to keep any vow or oath that you make, or keep any contractual agreements that you make, to adhere to your word when you give your word. The forbiddance of lying, the forbiddance of being deceptive and deceitful, being treacherous, the forbiddance of breaking one's promise. These are things, he said, that are dealt with in the al-ahkam al-akhlaqiyya, the laws related to akhlaq, morals and manners. He says, وَمَحَلُّ دُرَاسَتِهَا فِي عِلْمِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. And the place of its discussion or its study is considered the science of akhlaq, morals and manners. Okay? And scholars have written many books dealing with things pertaining to akhlaq. Even some hadith books were compiled specifically related to matters of morals and manners. Okay? So there are also laws regarding that in the Sharia. Okay? And then the third category, he says, al-ahkam al-muta'alliqa بأقوال وأفعال الإنسان في علاقاته مع غيره وهذه هي الأحكام العملية وقد سميت فيما بعد بالفقه ومحل دراستها علم الفقه. Okay? So he said the third category of laws in the Sharia of Islam are the laws that are related to the statements and actions of the human being and in regards to the person's relationships with others besides himself. And these are the al-ahkam al-amaliyah, the laws pertaining to actions and deeds. Okay? And these have been called, and later on throughout this book we're going to refer to these as fiqh. And the place of this study for mahal dirasatiha ilm al-fiqh, the science of fiqh is the study, this category. So fiqh is an aspect of the Sharia. That's what I'm trying to let you see. Okay? Sharia is more broad. Okay? It encompasses a lot of laws and things. Okay? But now specifically when you narrow it down, fiqh is not talking about beliefs, okay, our laws pertaining to what do we believe about the Day of Judgment? What do we believe about the hereafter? What do we believe about what will happen in the grave? What do we believe about, tawheed and categorizing how we understand belief in Allah's monotheism? That's not dealt with in fiqh. You're not going to find those discussions in the fiqh book, okay? There are some hadith books that deal specifically with fiqh matters. For example, if you look in Sunan Abi Dawood, this hadith book, it starts off with things that are related to fiqh. It starts off with tahara and purification and salat and things like this, okay? Whereas if you look in a hadith book like Sahih Bukhari, it begins with Badul Wahi, how did revelation begin? And there's things like, it deals with things that are more broad outside of the area of fiqh that deal with iman and belief. Okay, so certain scholars in their books they dealt with different aspects of the Sharia and why they compiled the book. What was the reason they compiled this book, and what are they trying to cover? Okay, so when you deal with fiqh, then you're dealing with the part of the Sharia that deals with specific rules and regulations and laws regarding to your deeds and actions and how you perform acts of worship and how you carry out those acts of worship and in relation to your relationship and how you deal with others regarding laws and regulations, okay? So that is dealt with in fiqh, okay? But if you're dealing with morals and manners, or if you're dealing with laws pertaining to beliefs and creed, then that is not in fiqh. But all of that I've mentioned is part of the Sharia. The laws of the Sharia. But fiqh deals with a certain aspect of the laws of the Sharia. Okay?
How many, or can you even say that, how many of those are there in Sharia? Like, is Aqidah one of them?
Right. Aqidah was the first one. Okay? So he says, al-ahkam al-muta'alliqa bil-aqidah. That's the first aspect of the laws of the Sharia. Okay? There are ahkam means laws. Okay? The plural singular is hukm. Okay? Hukm means a law, a rule. Okay? Ahkam, rules and regulations, laws, So ahkam al-muta'alliqa bil-aqidah means laws that relate to creed of beliefs, what we believe in, okay? That is part of the Sharia. That's the first one he mentioned. The second category are laws that relate to akhlaq, morals and manners, okay? All right, being kind to elders, don't lie, don't cheat, these type of things like this. Morals and manners, okay? Fulfill your oaths and promises like this, be merciful to children, be respectful to elders. These are that's part of the Sharia. They're ayats of the Qur'an and hadiths from the Prophet specifying laws and regulations about that, okay? And that's part of the Sharia, okay? Anything that comes from the Qur'an and the Sunnah, that revelation, that's part of the Sharia, okay? But then when you deal with the rules and regulations that deal with how to perform acts of worship, or specific, in reference to things that we say and do in our ritual acts and things like this, and also in our dealings with others. He says, علاقاته في علاقاته مع غيره, meaning in reference to the person's relationships with others. What are the laws like for marriage and divorce? That's a relationship between you and someone else. What are the laws of how you get married? Okay. What are the conditions to make the marriage valid? What things would nullify the marriage? You understand? If you wanted to get divorced, what do you have to do? That's laws dealing with you, but not just you, and also your relationships to someone else, okay? Also like with business transactions, buying and selling, okay? That's laws pertaining to you and also your dealings with someone else. All of that is dealt with in the third category of the laws of the Sharia, which we are going to call fiqh, okay? All right. So moving on, like I said, I'm not going to read all of this to you all because we don't have time, but inshallah you get the point. So now fiqh, this terminology, fiqh, since we've opened up that door. He says, al-fiqh fi al-lugha al-ilm bi-shay wal-fahm lahu. So in the language of the Arabic language, linguistically, fiqh in the language, it means al-ilmu bi-shay. It means knowledge of something. Wal-fahmu lahu, and your understanding of it. So fiqh literally means understanding. Okay, it means knowledge and understanding. Another word for it is fahm. Linguistically, we say fahm. Okay, all right. So he says it can be understood to mean what one understands from the intent of someone who is speaking. Okay, al-mutakallim. He says idrak ghard al-mutakallim min kalamihi, comprehending what someone meant when they were speaking. What did they intend in their speech? Okay, that's the linguistic meaning of what fiqh and fahm is. Okay, so and he says وَمِنْهُ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى, and from it is the Law's statement. فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. Allah says in Surah An-Nisa, verse 78, the verse, it says, what is wrong with these people? لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. They can barely understand any speech. Okay? Allah used the word يَفْقَهُونَ. It's the verbal form that comes from this word fiqh. Okay? Fiqh comes from the word yafqahu. Yafqahu means he understands. Fiqh is a noun that means understanding. And Allah used it in that verse in the Qur'an. He says, وَقَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى عَلَى لِسَانِ نَبِيهِ شُعَيْبٍ. And also there's an example in the statement of Allah the Most High in Surah Hud, verse 91, upon the tongue of the Prophet Shu'aib. He said, قَالُوا يَا شُعَيْبٍ مَا نَفْقَهُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَقُولُ. Shu'aib's people, they said, "O Shu'aib," talking to Prophet Shu'aib, they said, "O Shu'aib, مَا نَفْقَهُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَقُولُ." We don't understand much of what you're saying to us. Okay. He was calling them to worship Allah, and they were saying, we don't understand what you're talking about. So Allah used the word ma nafqahu. Comes from the word, it's a verb that comes from this noun. This noun comes from this fiqh, comes from this verb that Allah is using. Okay, all right.
It comes from the word faqaha,
Mm-hmm.
means to know.
Which means to know or to understand. Okay, so these forms that the Shaykh is giving it here is showing that Allah used forms of this word in the Qur'an verbally. But the way Allah used it in the linguistic sense, Allah wasn't talking about the science of fiqh, that we don't understand fiqh, the science of fiqh in Durar al-Mudiyah. No, they're saying we don't understand, fahm, la nafham, we don't understand. La nafqahu, ma nafqahu, kathiran mimma taqul, yani la nafham. We don't understand what you're saying, okay? All right? So he says, so then the word fiqh became used fil istilah al-shar'i, in the technical terminologies of this Islamic law, to mean على جميع الأحكام الدينية التي جاءت بها الشريعة الإسلامية سواء كانت هذه الأحكام متعلقة بأمور العقيدة أو بالأخلاق أو بالعبادات أو بالمعاملات. Okay? So he said, so later on the term fiqh started being used by the scholars of Islam to have a more specific meaning than just understanding. And they used it to mean all of the laws of the religion which came in the Islamic Sharia, the Islamic legislation, regardless of whether that was regarding the laws that were pertaining to the matters of belief, or the matters of character, or the matters of acts of worship, or the matters of transactions between people. They used fiqh to mean all of it, okay? So he says, so with this meaning, this technical terminology, okay, the word fiqh in that sense meant Sharia, okay? It meant everything, like we said, that Sharia was all of these things combined, all of these aspects are included in the Sharia, okay? So but he said, then جاء تعريف الإمام أبي حنيفة للفقه الإسلامي بقوله هو معرفة النفس ما لها وما عليها. So then one of the earliest fiqh scholars of this science of fiqh that we're going to be talking about, his name was Nu'man ibn Thabit Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa he was famously known as Abu Hanifa. Nu'man ibn Thabit was his name, and he was Persian. Okay, And he lived in Iraq. He gave a definition, codified, if you will, a definition for the science of fiqh as as we're going to discuss it in our topic. Okay, and he described it as this. He said, "Huwa ma'rifatun nafs ma laha wa ma alayha." It is this person knowing what is obligatory upon it and what it is due, meaning of rights, and what is obligatory upon it in reference to others. Okay, all right. Ma laha wa ma alayha. What is for you? What do I get? What is my right to have it? And what is upon me to render? Okay, all right. He gave that definition for it. Okay. He says, فيشمل هذا التعريف الأحكام الاعتقادية كوجوب الإيمان بالله تعالى والأحكام الوجدانية الأخلاقية كوجوب الصدق والأحكام العملية المتعلقة بالعبادات والمعاملات كوجوب الصيام وإباحة البيع إلى آخره. So he says, this definition that he gave, it still includes, though, because it's very general, it could include the laws of beliefs, okay? Because when you talk about what we're supposed to believe in, that is what is incumbent upon us, okay? That's something that we're supposed to render to Allah in reference to what we understand Allah's right upon us in reference to how we believe in Him. So that's still something that is included in Abu Hanifa's definition of fiqh. And like, for example, kawujub al-imani billahi ta'ala, he said, like, for example, the obligation to believe in Allah, okay? That still falls under the definition that Abu Hanifa gave, okay? But this is why Abu Hanifa, he separated fiqh into two categories. He said there's al-fiqh al-akbar and al-fiqh al-asghar, okay? And there are books that are attributed to him with these two titles, okay? Al-fiqh al-akbar wal-fiqh al-asghar. Al-fiqh al-akbar means the great fiqh, the great understanding, okay? The major fiqh. And al-fiqh al-asghar means the minor fiqh, the lesser fiqh understanding, okay? When he talked about al-fiqh al-akbar, he was talking about aqeedah, beliefs. Okay, this is the major understanding, the thing that is of great importance in reference to what we must understand. So he called that fiqh also, but al-fiqh al-akbar meaning yani al-aqeedah, al-iman, what are we supposed to believe in, okay? And then when he said al-fiqh al-asghar, the minor fiqh, he was talking about the laws pertaining to how to pray, how to fast, how to make wudu, how to pay zakat, like this. The laws pertaining to mu'amalat, transactions, and ibadat, how to perform acts of worship, okay? Okay, so in reference to when we talk about fiqh, there's something that he says here that I wanted to make sure I read to you. He says, وَبِهَذَا الْمَعْنَى الْإِسْتِلَاحِ الْجَدِيدِ. So he's talking about later on, the scholars came up with a more specific definition of fiqh. Let me read that to you before I go further, okay? He said the scholars began saying about fiqh, that when they codified it and it became an actual science, that was actually, this term fiqh was used for it, and it was considered a separate, distinct science of Islam. They said, al-ilmu bil-ahkam al-shar'iyya al-thabita li-af'al al-mukallifin khasatan kal-wujub wal-hadr, ay al-hurma, wal-ibaha, wal-nadb, wal-kiraha, وكون العقد صحيحا أو فاسدا أو باطلا وكون العبادة قضاء أو أداء وأمثاله. So they said that it is the knowledge of the laws of the Sharia, okay, the confirmed laws of the Sharia that are confirmed, that deal with the actions of those who are al-mukallifin. Someone who is mukallif means someone who is a sane adult. Okay, this is the term taklif, they said in Arabic, okay. This means the person is responsible. Taklif means responsible. Okay. This word, we get this word. You've heard the word kafala and kafil. In Saudi Arabia, they say you have a kafil. Okay. He's responsible. You're a sponsor. What does it mean? He's responsible for you. If you break laws or if you come into the kingdom of Saudi Arabia doing crazy things, your sponsor is responsible for you. Okay. That's the kafil. Okay. So this word kallafa taklifan. Kallafa yukallifu taklifan. It means to make someone responsible. Mukallaf is someone who has been made responsible. Okay, I'm giving you linguistics of it, okay?
It's like a affidavit of support here in America.
Right, yes. Yeah, I think we have some type of sponsorship here in America also, okay? In Saudi Arabia, they call it kafala, the kafala system, okay? It means responsible.
Everybody has to have somebody that's responsible for them.
When I was living in Saudi Arabia, yes, and I still think the law is still the same. I don't think that law has changed. Even some things have changed since I've lived in Saudi Arabia. I haven't lived in Saudi Arabia since 2001, and the last time I was in Saudi Arabia, even just visiting, I was 2003, and even at that time, it was still the same Kafala system was still there. Laws changed there. They changed different things in Saudi Arabia. Everything doesn't stay the same. What was true in 2001 and 2013 is maybe different. But the kafala system, I'm pretty sure it's still there for Saudi Arabia.
One of the reasons they do that is because a lot of people, they go for Hajj and Umrah, and then they stay.
They run. Yeah, when we say mukhalifin, these people, they run.
They don't go out.
Yeah, they're overstayers,
Millions of people.
illegals.
Millions.
Kind of like a situation we have here. Right, they have immigration problems, yes. All right.
Okay,
So,
that's men and women?
yes. Yeah, people sneak into the kingdom and overstay their legal welcome. Because especially for Muslims, I mean, it's the sweet land. I mean, the Mecca and Medina is there. You can make Hajj and Umrah, and the Prophet's Masjid. I mean, it's the holy land of the Muslims. Who wouldn't want to be there? So I mean, especially for a lot of people, even there, Saudi Arabia, the economy. This is out of our topic, but the economy there is a lot better than it is in other places in the Middle East and in the third world countries. So those people, they still want to come to Saudi, even if it's not for religious reasons, even if it's just to work. They will make more money there and do better for themselves there than they would in their home countries. So they try to come to there. All right. So, but this, just to give you some background about this word mukallaf. Okay, a mukallaf is someone who has been made responsible. Okay, and they're held responsible for certain duties and obligations. Okay. And particularly as someone who is aqil, they're sane, okay, and they're baligh, they're an adult, they've reached the age of maturity, okay, they've reached beyond the age of puberty, okay. And of course the Muslim is Islam. So there's a Muslim who is aqil and who is baligh, that's considered mukallaf, okay. They're responsible, okay. Sane Muslim adult, okay. So the laws pertaining to, he says, the laws that have come in the Sharia that pertain specifically to the actions and deeds of those people who are responsible adults, responsible, mature, sane adult Muslim adults. For example, what is obligatory upon them and what is forbidden upon them, and what is allowed for them and what is recommended and what is disliked. And for example, is a contract that they make, is it valid or is it invalid? Okay, like this, all right. And what would nullify the contract, etc. And for example, he says, for example, the act of worship that they do, is it something that they're doing that is making up for something that they missed, or is it something that they're doing it in the proper time that they're supposed to do it and it's on time, or is it something that they missed but they're doing another action to make up for it? All of these things are considered under the laws of fiqh. Okay, and so there are different terminology. Oh, well, before we get to that, there's two more things we're going to discuss, and then we'll let you guys go. So he says, so with this meaning, this definition that we've given for fiqh, okay. He says, خرجت من مفهومه الأحكام الاعتقادية والأخلاقية. So what is it leaves out, its understanding leaves out the laws pertaining to beliefs and the laws pertaining to morals and manners. So he's going back to saying, with that definition, it excludes the things related to beliefs, aqidah, and it excludes the things related to akhlaq, morals and manners. Okay. So we're only talking about those things that are deeds and actions, whether they're ritual acts of worship or they're transactions between people. What are the laws and regulations? Okay, not related to beliefs or not pertaining to what is right and wrong in reference to morality. Okay, so he says, وصار مدلوله قاصرا على الأحكام العملية أي على العبادات والمعاملات كما قلنا. So he says, so therefore, this definition, it's restricted specifically to the laws of deeds and transactions, which means acts of worship and the transactions between the people. That's what it's dealing with, okay? And so he says, وخرج أيضا من مفهوم الفقه حسب التعريف المختار الأحكام التي لا تؤخذ بالاستدلال أي بطريق النظر في الأدلة التفصيلية والبحث والاجتهاد. So he says also what is excluded from this definition, according to the preferred understanding of what fiqh means, is laws that are not taken from seeking evidences. Or meaning the person does not take the laws by بطريق النظر, meaning looking النظر في الأدلة التفصيلية, meaning people who take a law and act upon it without looking for the sources of the evidences and where the evidences came from and why this ruling is as it is. And he says, wal-bahth, which means researching, wal-ijtihad, which means making effort to find out, does this have evidence, is it right and wrong, or right or wrong, and where did it come from? Okay. He said anything that's laws that are taken like that, without referring back to the sources and looking for proof, he said that also falls outside of what our definition of fiqh is. That's not fiqh. Okay. All right. He says, so فعلم المقلدين بالأحكام لا يسمى فقها لأنه غير مكتسب عن طريق النظر والاستدلال. So he says, so therefore, the knowledge that comes from people who blindly follow others, like people who blindly follow what's called madhabs, madhahib, blind followers of madhab. He said that what the knowledge that they have of the different laws, like someone may memorize the laws of the Shafi'i madhab, memorize the laws and rules of the Hanafi madhab, memorize the rules and regulations of the Maliki madhab, and we'll talk about all of this as we go on, okay? They memorize these rules and regulations and laws of this particular madhab, the school of thought, but they don't know anything about where the rules and regulations came from, where the hadith is about it, is the hadith authentic or not, why do we put our hands here instead of here or here instead of there? They don't know anything about that. They just know, in my madhab we do like this. That's not fiqh. He said, this is not considered fiqh, okay? That's taqleed, that's just blind imitation. Fiqh means you seek evidence and you understand why you're doing what you're doing. That's included in the definition of what fiqh is, okay? So he says the people who, the muqallidun, okay, the people who are blind followers like this, who blindly follow laws of different madhabs, then he said this is not considered fiqh because they did not make any effort to try to find out why they're upon this path and what is the evidences for it. He says, كَمَا لَا يُسَمَّى صَاحِبُهَا فَقِيهًا. And he says, likewise, the person who does this cannot be called a faqih, meaning faqih means a scholar of fiqh. In other words, he's saying a scholar of fiqh is not someone who blindly follows the rulings of someone else. That's not a scholar of fiqh. That's a muqallid, a taqleed. And taqleed in its meaning, it means that you're jahil, you're ignorant. You don't know. So you're blindly following someone else because you don't know. And you don't have you don't know how to look for the answer. So you just blindly imitate someone else that you trust. Okay? That's not knowledge. That's jahl and taqleed. You're ignorant, you don't know, so you're blindly imitating someone else. Okay? So someone who's like that, he's saying, cannot be considered a faqih, a scholar of fiqh. Okay? That's not a fiqh scholar. So you see someone saying, well, I learned from my shaykh, and he just, what did your shaykh teach you from? Well, he just taught us from he strictly sticks to Shafi. He's just shaykh of Shafi. The shaykh of Shafi, I mean, does he just blindly follow what he finds in the books of Shafi? Yes, but that's how no, then he's not a faqih, he's not a scholar of fiqh then. He's just, parroting what someone else said. Doesn't have any dalil for what he's saying. He's just teaching you ahkam, but he's not teaching you where you're not understanding where these laws came from, okay? So that does not make him a faqih, He's muqallid himself. Your teacher himself is a blind follower, You understand? Yeah. This is the point he's making. You have a question?
Well, the
Madhahib? Singular is madhab.
yeah. Okay.
School of thought.
Are those people, those sheikhs alive?
No. They lived many, many centuries ago. The earliest of them was Abu Hanifa. The second in sequence of time was Malik ibn Anas, who lived in Medina. Abu Hanifa was in Iraq. Malik ibn Anas was in the Hijaz area, particularly Medina. He was known as the Imam of Medina. And of his students was Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, who later became known as the Imam of the Shafi'i madhab. He was a student of Imam Malik. Okay, and he was originally from Palestine, the area that's now Palestine, and he traveled to the area of the Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, when he was very young, and he became a student of Imam Malik and studied in Medina. And then he left Medina to go to Iraq to study under Abu Hanifa. But when he arrived there, Abu Hanifa had died. So he studied under the students of Abu Hanifa. And then he left Iraq and he traveled to Egypt and was trying to study with Layth ibn Sa'd, a great imam who many people don't know about, but he was also a great scholar of that time, who had his own students and his own school of religious law. His name was Layth ibn Sa'd, and he was in Egypt. So Imam Shafi'i left Iraq and traveled to Egypt to study with Layth. When he got there, Layth had died, so he studied Layth's madhab from Layth's students. Okay, all right. So he was the third in succession of time, and then the last was Ahmed ibn Hanbal, who was a student of Imam Shafi'i. Okay, and he was of all of them, he was considered the most knowledgeable in hadith. He was considered the Imam of hadith of all of them. As a matter of fact, the largest hadith collection that we have as in the Muslim Ummah is the Musnad of Al-Imam Ahmed. It has the most hadiths in it, okay?
Okay, so they wrote the hadith?
Imam Ahmed, he collected. He didn't write he collected hadiths, okay? I mean, he didn't make them up himself, but he had chains of narration. Like we said, I heard from my teacher who heard from this companion of the Prophet that the Prophet said. And so he compiled it in a book called Al-Musnad. And it's the largest hadith collection that exists, okay? But he was also a faqih, a scholar of fiqh, and so he was the head of, considered the imam or the teacher of the Hanbali madhab, which is now called the Hanbali madhab, the madhab of Imam Ahmed, okay? They call them Hanabila, or the followers al-Hanbaliya, okay? And then the followers of the Shafi'i madhab are called al-Shafi'iyya, okay? The followers of Imam Shafi'i. The followers of Imam Malik's madhab are called Malikiyya, And the followers of Imam Abu Hanifa, his madhab are called al-Hanafiya, okay? Al-Ahnaf, okay? Yes.
Are there more than these four?
There are more than these four.
But only these four became famous?
Yes. That's another point I was going to make. Like I just mentioned to you all, Imam Shafi'i went to study with Layth ibn Sa'd, and he got there and Layth had died, okay? And after studying with Layth, he said that Layth ibn Sa'd was more knowledgeable than his two former teachers, Malik and Abu Hanifa, okay? You understand? But he said the unfortunate thing is that Layth's madhab was not preserved because his students were not diligent about keeping up with writing down what they learned from him. So that's why his madhab didn't become as famous as the others. So today you don't find people saying they're Laythis. Okay, all right. But his Shafi'i said when I studied Layth's madhab, he was more brilliant in fiqh and not in his knowledge of fiqh than Abu Hanifa or Malik. You know, you understand?
Do you normally follow one, or do you?
Well, this is the point. This is the thing. This is the thing. If I tell you, let's say I say to you, just for the sake of argument, I say yes, you have to pick one. You now, Jennifer, how are you going to pick one? That's the point. It doesn't make sense. Okay. There's no way. You don't even know these people. How am I supposed to flip a coin and just, pick straws or whatever, pull straw? How are you supposed to tell, So we're not obligated to follow. Some people will tell you that. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. There are some people who will tell will tell you as a Muslim, sister, you have to pick one of the madhabs. You have to pick an imam and follow that one madhab. If you don't, you'll go crazy. You have to find one of the madhabs and stick to only that one. But, there's nothing in the Qur'an that says that. There's nothing in the hadith that says that. It didn't come from, when we began this class, we said our sources are, what did Allah say? What did the Prophet say? What did the Sahaba understand? Okay. None of that came from any of those three original main sources of Islam. That's something that came later. Even those imams themselves did not teach like that. They were just scholars who were seeking the truth to the best of their ability, and what they came upon, what their knowledge, allowed them, what they understood to be the truth, they ruled according to it, okay? All right, but they did not look at their schools of Islamic jurisprudence as something that, if you study my school, you can't, look at what anybody else said, you have to blindly follow me. This is not correct. If you look at their statements, there are plenty of statements from all of them saying, don't just blindly follow us, rather take from where we took, all right? Imam Shafi'i said, if you find a hadith that's authentic, then that's my madhab, even if I ruled contrary to it, okay? Meaning maybe it didn't come to me in my time, and I didn't know that was the sunnah. So I gave a ruling based upon my own opinion, based upon what I thought to be the truth. But if you find out that the hadith of the Prophet says something else, then follow my way is the way of the Prophet, And another narration, he said, if you find my ruling contradicting the statement of the Prophet, he said, then take my ruling and throw it up against the wall. All right. And there are many statements from all of them saying this. Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, alaykum bil athar wa tariqat al-salaf. He said, you all must stick to the narrations. I mean, the athar, he's talking about the sunnah, the hadith. Wa tariqat al-salaf, and the way of the salaf. This is Abu Hanifa, the earliest of them, of all of those four, saying that you have to follow the sunnah and the way of the salaf, meaning the sahaba. Follow the sahaba, meaning Ahlus-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah. Follow the way of the sunnah, the hadith, and what the sahaba were doing. Not my madhab, So these imams, as one person I heard explain it years ago, and it's a very good analogy. It's like if there's a signpost on the street, okay? That sign is directing you, saying, okay, the detour is that way to get to the Kroger market. The street is closed off, but there's a sign saying detour. This is detour. Go this way to get to Nolensville Road to get to the Kroger. This road is blocked off. You don't cling to the sign and just hold on to the sign and hope to get to Kroger's. The sign is telling you go that way to get to Kroger's. Those imams are like that. They're pointing you to Qur'an and Sunnah. Don't cling to them. Follow where they're pointing you. Qur'an and Sunnah is that way. You understand? Don't get caught up into individuals. All right. And that's what happened in the Ummah, unfortunately, for political reasons. There's a lot of history behind why things happened, developed the way they did. For example, it was Sufyan al-Thawri. His name was Sufyan al-Thawri. He lived in the time, he was a contemporary of Abu Hanifa, which I told you, Abu Hanifa was one of the earliest of them, okay? Abu Hanifa was like in the second generation, okay? Sufyan al-Thawri was one of his contemporaries in Iraq. The scholars in that time, they said that Sufyan al-Thawri was more knowledgeable than Abu Hanifa, but what happened was Abu Hanifa, he was like considered, Abu Hanifa was, he had his students teaching there in Baghdad and what have you, and Kufa, and the people were gathering around him. Sufyan al-Thawri was offered the position to be the qadi, the head judge, the mufti, like of the land, of the area of Iraq, okay, by the governor at that time, and he refused. He did not want to work for the government, okay, and because of that, the governor, the ruler, put out a warrant for his arrest, and to have him, that he was to be, tortured and arrested and brought to jail and punished, because it was considered disrespectful. I offered you this position and you said you don't want it. Seize him, So Sufyan al-Thawri spent the rest of his life, they said, on the run. He never was able to establish himself anywhere. He was fleeing, his whole life he was fleeing from the governor, So he would go from place to place and teach a little bit, and then he'd have to pack up and leave, So he never was able to establish students like Abu Hanifa did, because Abu Hanifa was, stable, and, people were able to come around him, and he was set up shop, basically, But even though people who studied Sufyan al-Thawri's works later, they say that he was more brilliant than even Abu Hanifa was. But we weren't able to benefit his teachings didn't really survive as much. They're scattered in the books of the other scholars that we find that Sufyan's opinion was this or Sufyan's opinion was that. But it was not in collective works where we have the book of Sufyan al-Thawri on fiqh. It didn't survive like that. So it's just, these are circumstantial things, historical circumstances. It's not something that was revelation from Allah that there are 4 imams. Oh, you believe, pick one of the 4. There's no verse like that in the Quran. There's no revelation from that. We follow the Qur'an and the Sunnah the way it was understood by the Sahaba. Okay. If we find stuff with the Madh-hab, these Madh-habs that is correct, we know it's correct if it agrees with Qur'an and Sunnah. If it doesn't agree with Qur'an and Sunnah, we find something contradicting it, then we don't take it. We just put it to the side and we make excuses for the Imam. The reason he ruled different to that is because that information had not come to him. If he knew that information, he would have ruled according to it. All right. So there's even reports that, for example, Abu Hanifa, they say his madhab is based upon less than 300 hadiths. 300 or something like this, a few hundred hadiths. The entire Hanafi madhab is based upon, so there are more hadiths than that in Bukhari or Muslim. So a lot of his madhab was based upon his ijtihad, his reasoning, and what seemed right, trying to deduce what seemed logical, So there, those are circumstantial, historical circumstantial things. Okay. So in reference to, and the last thing we'll conclude with, and I'll let you all go. I said there were 2 things, so this is the last thing. The last thing is that there are certain, when we talk about the al-ahkam al-Sharee'ah al-amaliyah, these fiqh law, which we call fiqh, these legislative laws pertaining to actions, which means acts of worship and transactions, okay? For every action that the servants of Allah do, there is a ruling, okay? There's a ruling for it, okay? It is those rulings are as follows: that wujub, which means it's obligatory. That thing is obligatory. We say wajib, okay, or wujub, okay. The next is al-hurmah, which people will say haram, it's forbidden, okay. So one is wajib, that's obligatory, you must do it. Haram, forbidden, you can't do it. You should not do this. You cannot do this thing, okay. The next is an-nadb, which also became called istihbab or mustahab, which means it's recommended. If you do it, it's recommended, okay? You'll be rewarded if you do it. If you don't do it, there's no sin on you. But if you do it, there is reward for it, okay? It's recommended. Then there's al-kiraha. Also we say makruh. It's disliked. Meaning if you don't do it, you're rewarded. If you do it, it's not haram, but it's better to not do it, okay? The reward is in abstaining from it, okay?
Can you give us an example of that?
That's an old fatwa. In the old days, the scholars, before they knew the science behind cigarettes, they said some of the scholars used to say that cigarette smoking was makruh, kiraha. Why? Why did they say? They said, well, because it leaves a foul odor on the person's clothing and in his breath. And the Prophet said that if whoever eats of these 2 plants, meaning the onion and the garlic, then let him stay away from our masjid. For verily the angels are harmed by whatever harms the children of Adam. They're disturbed by whatever disturbs the children of Adam. Meaning so bad odors, having stinky feet, dirty socks or whatever, bad breath, these things like this, should be, if you have that, you should remove that before coming to the masjid, okay? Now, that doesn't mean it's haram, but it's just, the nahi is for kiraha. The prohibition is of saying it's disliked, okay? In other words, if a person goes to the masjid, all right, they have a foul odor on them, their prayer is still valid, and it's not haram for them to go to the masjid, but it's disliked. It's better for them to remove the foul odor, then come to the masjid, okay? So this is makruh. So they said, well, using qiyas, an analogy, they said, well, cigarette smoking, we don't know anything bad about it other than it has a foul odor and it disturbs people, the scent, the smell that's on the person coming from his skin and clothes from smoking it. So we'll say it's like garlic and onions, So kira makruh, okay. But later on, when science discovered that, hey, this thing the nicotine is messing with the P53 gene in the DNA, which leads to cancer, person developing, cancerous cells and what have you, or can lead to lung cancer and all this type of thing. It messes with the cardiovascular system, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Then it became haram. The scholar said it's haram, because there's no benefit in it. There's no, you understand, there's no health benefit in it. There's nothing, no one can say smoking a cigarette will increase you in strength and stamina, help you think more sharply, nothing, no health benefit determined for this thing at all, you know. And the only thing we find of it is that it, you know, when you study pathology of diseases, that a lot of diseases the cigarettes will make you predisposed. Smoking cigarettes and tobacco products will predispose you to make you more susceptible to getting, you know, those diseases. You know, so systemic diseases, illnesses. Okay, so you know, it's, you know, even in dentistry, you know, we advise the patients against smoking because it affects the salivary gland output. Okay, so with it lessening it like vasoconstricts it, which lessens meaning the person who smoke cigarettes, typically when we do periodontal testing on them, this is something, I'm going outside, going away from fiqh, going into dentistry now. But what will happen is we find that they have less gingival bleeding in their gum tissue the blood vessels are not as proliferant in the gum tissue. Why? Because the cigarettes have vasoconstricted and shut down the small blood vessels, okay? And also it's going to make the salivary flow less, okay? Which all of this is bad because blood flow in your gums helps you to fight off bacteria that you don't want in the mouth. Okay, because what gets the immunoglobulins and the antibodies to the area where there's an infection is blood. The bloodstream carries those antibodies, those immunoglobulins to the area to fight off whatever needs to be the white blood cells and whatever. The blood is carrying that there. Okay, so if your blood flow is lessened, then your body is less able to fight infection. Okay, because the blood those immune cells cannot get there to fight. And the B cells and T cells and, like I said, the antibodies, they can't get there to fight the infection, okay? So cigarettes harm that, okay? It's harm. Also, diminishing the salivary flow, the saliva has certain things in it that also help fight bacteria, okay? So if immunoglobulin A is in saliva, which helps fight bacteria, and there are also different lysosomes and things in saliva that help fight bacteria, okay? If your salivary flow is lessened, then you're more susceptible to dental caries. The person's more likely to get cavities, okay, if they don't have a good salivary flow, all right? So, it's a condition called xerostomia. It means low saliva or low to no saliva, okay? So cigarettes affect all of that, you know. That's just from a dental aspect, me speaking to you as a dentist, you know, let alone the stuff, the cardiovascular and all that other stuff that it deals with, the pulmonary effects and so forth, cancerous, so the scholars rule that it's haram because it leads to killing yourself, basically. It's a slow method of killing yourself, okay? And Allah says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, you know, do not kill yourselves, you know, don't kill yourselves. Or don't throw yourselves in another verse, do not throw yourselves into destruction, bi-aydikum, you know, don't throw yourselves into destruction by your own hands, okay? So they said, based upon this, it's haram, okay? So that's hurma, that's the second category. So we said a nadab, which is recommended, and kiraha, which means disliked, meaning it's not forbidden. There's nothing that absolutely forbids it in Islam, but it is disliked, okay? Also, al-ibaha. Al-ibaha means, we say mubah. Another word that people use for it is halal. It means it's permissible, okay? It's not obligatory, but it's lawful, all right? It's not forbidden, and it's not obligatory. If you do it, it's okay. If you don't do it, it's okay, you know? It's just okay to do it or not, all right? Okay, so those 5 categories are the main categories of anything in Islam. Everything you do, anything act of worship or anything you do, etc., will have a ruling for it, okay? And these are the terminologies that the scholars of fiqh use to describe those particular things. So wajib means it's obligatory. You must do it. If you don't do it, that's a sin. Like, for example, what? Making salat, okay? It's obligatory for the Muslim to pray daily, okay? All right, fasting the month of Ramadan, it's wajib. If you don't do it, it's a sin, okay? It's not okay just to not do it if you don't want to do it. It's obligatory, okay? Allah has commanded it. That's wajib, okay? Al-hurma, tahrim, means something is haram, means forbidden, meaning you must stay away from it. If you do it, it's a sin, okay? If you stay away from it, you reward it. If you do it, it's a sin. It's the opposite of wajib, okay? Haram and wajib, some people said, the Hanafi madhab, they said farud means wajib, okay? They're the opposites of each other. Nadib, something is mandub or mustahab, that means it's recommended. If you do it, you get rewarded. If you don't do it, there's no sin against you, okay? And then the opposite of it is al-kiraha. We say makruh, this thing is disliked. If you stay away from it, you're rewarded. If you do it, it's not a sin. It's not haram. But if you stay away from it, you're rewarded. It's better for you, okay? And then al-ibaha, something that is mubah, means what? Halal. It's okay, all right? Halal doesn't mean wajib. Halal just means you can do it or you can leave it. It's no sin on you if you do it, and it's no sin on you if you leave it, all right? Understand? So those are the 5 main categories of the different actions and deeds when we talk about them in the terminology of fiqh. Okay. So anyway, we'll stop with that because we can. As you see, this is a big long book, and I'm not going to read the whole book. I just want to introduce you all to the topic, and what we're going to go into next week, we're going to talk about a brief biography of Al-Imam al-Shawkani. We'll talk a little bit more about the history of fiqh. I'll do a little bit more from the history of fiqh, talking about these madh-hab and things like that. We talk about the madh-habs. We'll talk some about the history of that, and then we'll talk about the biography of Imam al-Shawkani. And inshallah, then the week after that, we'll start directly into the first chapter of this book, Adur al-Bahiyya, Fil Masail al-Fiqhiyya, and the first deals with purification. The first chapter deals with purification. Yeah, Kitab al-Tahara, the book of purification. Okay, all right. All right. Okay, so inshallah we'll start with that. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Ameen wa iyyakum.